Greetings everyone through here. Welcome to the Demo Hub. Welcome to our session for today. Today's session is a very exciting session. We're going to jump in. We're going to look at Snowpark for Python. And we're going to do a masterclass to go deep and unpack hands-on certain capabilities within Snowpark for Python. That's very exciting for data professionals of all levels. So from beginners to intermediates to experts, this masterclass session is going to be jam-packed full of tips and tricks and really getting you from zero to hero working with Snowpark for Python, a very anticipated capability within the Snowflake family of tools. Now for the agenda, we're going to look at, of course, working with Snowpark for Python. We're going to go in and create Python UDFs within the SnowSite SQL worksheets. We're going to see how to take those UDFs we can write on the Snowflake SQL worksheet and bring that back into your favorite IDE. So this could be Visual Studio Code or PyCharm or Jupyter Notebook, and referencing all of that. Again, leveraging the Snowpark for Python sessions. We're going to go into some more advanced concepts here to reference existing code, standalone files, and how we can reference that within Snowpark for Python. We're going to also see how to register UDFs, something that's very common when working with Snowpark for Python. You can use data frames or you can create UDFs and register those UDFs as functions that everyone can use and really democratize access to the work that you and your team are doing. So a very exciting session. Again, this will be hands-on, meant to be a masterclass. You can follow step by step, pause at any point if you want to. A lot of this code will be left in the description below or on the GitHub for Demohub. So do check those out. And if you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comment section below. I will see what we can do. Now, before we jump in, there are two key resources to call out. To follow along, you can always read the documentation, but like we say here, the goal for the Demo Hub is to be an extension to the documentation for the tools you use. So you can always go in and read the documentation here. The Snowpark Developer Guide for Python is a very important documentation. You want to bookmark this and reference it as much as you can. Also, the Snowpark API reference guide is key. This two together would really get you 90% of your way there to not just being competent with Snowpark for Python, but with really elevating the game and using this to solving your everyday data problems that Snowpark for Python is meant to solve. Now, that said, let's jump in to our very first scenario. Let's start by creating a new file. So let's call this Demohub mask. So imagine a scenario where we have some code and the data that's coming into the organization is sensitive data, and we want to do some masking. This is something that anyone who works with Python would typically do. So let's go in here and just write a very simple Python function that would take some values and it's going to mask that for us. We're going to import regex, bring in secrets. And this code is nothing fancy. This is run-of-the-mill code you can find online. It's going to preserve the format of the masking we're doing, and it's going to mask whatever values we give. All right, so I'll test this by calling the function my mask, and we can mask any value. This is an email address. You don't want your email addresses for the users coming in. You want to mask that. Now we have a function that the team has done. You can do this with SQL, to be honest. But with Python, we know Python extends SQL. Well, SQL for short, you want to look to Python. And this is where Python really extends with SQL for short. So let's test this. Local Python code we're running now locally with nothing to do with Snowpark for Python, just something to get our feet wet. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Of course, it's not going to print anything for us. So I'm going to have to make a change there so we can print and see the result that this masking function actually works. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, good. So I do have this. So this could be sensitive information coming in for your organization. And you want to have a standard way where everybody loading data is going to mask that data before you use it for analytics. Governance is a prerequisite these days for data teams. So now we can take the email, we've masked it. And not only are we masking that, we're preserving the format. So this is format preserving encryption, something very common in the industry. You just don't want to scramble things around. You want to preserve this. If this is an email, we're still preserving the format. So you have the start, you have the @ symbol, and you have the middle, and then you have the the last domain at the end. So again, this function, you can replace this with whatever function you're trying to implement within your organization, but we're going to see how we can take something like this and democratize this beyond just a simple script and bring it to the masses for the organization, so that every team that's going to be masking data, they don't have to implement this function again. They can leverage this function natively within Snowpark for Python as functions. So there are two ways that we're going to do this. I'm going to show the first way of doing it. Let's go back to our agenda. I'm going to show how we can do this by leveraging SQL worksheets and using Python natively. And then we're going to come back and see how we can do that leveraging the capabilities of Snowpark on the client side. So very important. Now let's go back one more time, take a look at this function. We want to implement this function on Snowflake and bring this to the masses. The very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a function. Let's call this my mask. I think that's the name we had before. And what is this function going to take? It's going to take a value, and let's make that a string. Okay. Now, what is it going to return? It should return a string that we can go in. Of course, with Snowflake, the beauty about it is now this is a platform that supports multiple different languages. We can specify, are we trying to do this in SQL, or are we trying to do this in Python or Java or Scala? But SQL is what we want. So all fine and good. Next, we can specify the runtime. With Python, there are different runtimes that are available. So let's do a runtime version, make this Python 3.8. So let's make this Python 3.8. Once we're done with that, go in and specify some packages. So if I go back in here, we need the regex package, whatever package we need. The beauty about doing this in Snowpark or on the Snowflake UI is you can also specify any packages that is needed for this. So the syntax for that is just going to tell it we want this as regex. So we want the regex package in there. Now, this is key. Let's just pause here and then see how we can continue with this. I'm going to use the magic of copy and paste. This is our function. The code is exactly the same code we have here. You can just simply copy this code and replace that in here, and it should be all fine and good. There is a function called mask, and the whole goal for this is to mask that. But there's one thing that we have to specify to make this all work. So if you're going to implement your own function, you can certainly do it. There's just one thing, the entry point into this function. We're going to have to specify that, which is called the handler. So when you call this function, how should it enter to call the Python code? You can have several functions below here, but you need an entry point for that to work. We're going to specify this as a handler, and the handler for that is what? Is a quick mask, right? That's the name of this entry point that we're trying to get into. Now, whatever name you had in here, if you had it as main, you're going to put main up there. If you had it as compute, you're going to put compute up there. So whatever name you use, you just want to have that handler match that. So just like that, we have a function right here within Snowflake from the Snowside UI. Now, before we run this, something to call out that's important. The reason why we're specifying SQL worksheets here is because depending on when you're watching this video and going through this masterclass, there would be the ability to just write Python natively with Python worksheets where you don't even have to specify SQL or wrap your code around the syntax we're doing here. All right, you can just take all of this out, and basically put your Python code natively in here. That will be a focus for a different video, for a different deep dive, for a different masterclass. But for now, depending again when you're watching this video, this syntax is what you can certainly use. That said, let's go in and run this code. It does have an error here. Of course, it likes returns. And we need to make sure that there is no typo anywhere. So let's go ahead and run this. This was successful and that function should have been created. Let's go ahead and verify that. Now we have a function here called my mask, and this function could be used like any other native function within Snowflake. So the average user working within Snowflake doesn't have to know Python, but now they have a function that they can simply use, they can call, they can invoke and solve their business problems. Let's go ahead and test this function we've just created by calling that. I'm going to give it some data, which could be sensitive. So in here, we have a string, we have an email, social security. Of course, this is just made up, phone number. Typically, you don't want to persist this within your database. Or if you do, you want to mask it so the users that are querying this don't see sensitive data and potentially expose that. You can use things like row access policies and dynamic masking to apply this logic to it. But let's go ahead and run this statement. What we see now is a function implemented in Python, and the data is masked, but the format has been preserved. So format preserving encryption, FPE, a very common thing in the industry. Just like that, we've implemented that in Snowflake Snowsite. Very powerful. Now let's check this off our list. We're done with Python UDFs using Snowsite, writing this in SQL, and anyone can do this. You can put arbitrary Python code in here or as complex as you want it, and this would generate a UDF, and you can use this UDF to run against your data set and keep everything secure. Now let's go back in the next phase here and see how we can do this as opposed to writing this on the server side inside Snowflake worksheet. Let's see how we can do this on the client side, leveraging a Snowpark for Python. Create a new file, call this Demohub, and call this masker.py. With a new file created, let's go ahead and paste a piece of code. This is just a boilerplate to get us started with a session with Snowpark for Python. There are videos, there are demos on the channel that goes deep into this. If you haven't watched those, I recommend you start with those videos. Now here, just to recap on what we have, we're going to bring in the parser. We're going to bring in a couple of modules and packages. We're going to bring in the config to read credentials from a configuration file, and this will authenticate into our Snowflake environment. All of that is being passed into our configurations parameters. Go ahead and use that to create a session. Now, this session is a Snowpark for Python session ready. We've done a lot of videos on this. I really recommend you go on the channel and you watch those videos. Let's jump in and see how we can start taking advantage of existing code within the organization, leveraging the Snowpark for Python capabilities. So just to recap, we have an existing file here with logic that has already been implemented. We do not want to do this again. We just want to take advantage of this existing code. All right, one way we've seen is we can copy this code and come over here and paste it and execute it. But there are other ways that we can also do this, and that's what we're going to explore to see how we can still take advantage of this code and bring that into Snowflake and democratize access to this function without doing a lot of work. And we're going to use the Snowpark for Python capability. So let's go back into our masker. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to do session. We're going to use our session that Snowpark provides, do add import. And I really love the autocomplete here. It tells us the different functions and what they are. So we're going to do add import. And what are we going to add import? We're going to add import a file. So this is going to ask for a path to a file. This file can be locally, or it can be on a stage in Snowflake. I'm going to show the example of referencing a local file, but be rest assured, if this file was on a stage in Snowflake, you can make it work. Here, what file are we trying to reference? We're going to reference the mask.py. So this is our existing file that had the logic. We want to get access to this logic. We want to call that function and use it. So now I'm going to go back here. We've referenced that file. All good. Now, if this file was on a stage, you're going to add the add symbol and then put the path to where you had this file in the stage on the Snowflake side. So either way would work. Now we've referenced this file, we've added it to the session. One more thing we can add is any dependencies. I'm just going to go above that and I'm going to add packages. You can also add requirements. There are a lot of things that you can add, and I'll recommend you check out the documentation for that. For this, what are we going to add? We need regex. As an example, we want the regex that's been imported here because we're not going to do any of this logic if we don't have regex available. All right. Let's go back into our masker code. Now our session has the existing code ready to go. Now within Snowpark for Python, we can go in and register that function. So how are we going to do that? So we're going to come in and say session. We're going to do udf.register. And you can do a register, but that's not what we want. We want to do another register instead. So do register from file because this file exists already. So let's take that. What file do we want? We're going to have to put in a file path. Okay. What is the file path we're trying to register? So give this a th_mask py. So that's the file path we're trying to get access to. And we have to give it a function name. Okay. What's the function name that we're trying to create? So let's give this that we're trying to access. So we'll give this my mask. Again, what is my mask? My mask is the function inside of this file we're trying to access. All right. So if I go into this file, there is this function here called my mask. We want to access that. I can go ahead and delete this. It's not necessary. So we're going to reference that. Now, what else do we need? We need to say, and this is just boilerplate stuff, we need to say, is this UDF we're trying to register on the Snowflake site, is that permanent or not? Right? I'm going to make this permanent. So let's make that true. A couple more things that we need. Do we want to replace this? Let's do replace, make that as well. Should we replace this or not? I think we should replace this. So let's go ahead and make replace true. All right. Now we can replace true. But what is the name of this function that we want when we register this as a UDF on the Snowflake site? Because we want to take this function, we want to register this as a UDF. We've seen how to create functions in Snowflake here by pasting the code, but we don't want to paste the code. We just want to reference that existing code and then register that as a UDF. All right. So let's give a name to this. So let's go back to this code here. We're going to give a name for this. So what name do we give? So there's another parameter here called name, and we can give a name. What was the name that we used here? So let's just call this my mask. Then do F1. And I'm going to do F1 because we're going to see a second way of registering this code. We want to use the numbers there to distinguish what we're doing. Call this name is equals F1. So usually you want to put in a stage, especially when registering permanent UDFs, because we're making this permanent. You always want to put a stage there. I do have an existing stage, which is called add through stage. All right. I think maybe through STG is what my stage is called. And just like that, we now have, just to recap what we're doing here, is we have existing code in a Python file called th_mask.py. This is existing logic. This could be a machine learning model. This could be some advanced logic your team has built over the years and it's just sitting. And we want to take this and open it up and bring it as a UDF that everyone else can call and use within your organization. All right. Now what we've done is we've kept the code where it is. We've come in here. We've created a session to Snowflake, Snowpark for Python. We've added the packages and the dependencies that we need. We've added import to give visibility to that file to this session. And then now we're going to go in and register a UDF. So session.udf.register from file. We specify the file, tell it what function from that file we want. Is it permanent or not? Replace that, give it the name of a new UDF and the stage where they should work. So go ahead and run this. Everything's running. We're seeing some comments being printed out below. But the net result for this is not running locally. The moment I hit the run, this code has been all packaged up and is going over to Snowflake, and this function will be registered. It's completed. Switch back over here, do a refresh. Now we have a new UDF that has been registered. Just like that. It's that easy. Okay. Copy this select statement. Try the new UDF, my mask _ F1. That's the name we gave. Just like that, we've started from the local machine. We've written our Python code. Actually, we didn't even write the code. The code existed before. We've referenced that file. We've created a UDF. We've registered a UDF. And now you can see we're passing in the values and that UDF is doing the format preserving inscription for us. Again, this could be something really complex you've done. This could be a machine learning model. You want to score users. Is this user going to default or not? And that logic could already exist. You can register that and bring it to the masses. That code is taking Python and bringing it to the masses. Because I'm doing this in SQL, I don't need to know what the logic behind this was. This could be coming from some complex Python file. It doesn't matter to me as the end users, really meeting users where they are. I love what we've done here. We've referenced an existing code. We've called it and we've seen how to make that work. Let's look at another way of doing this that's fun. All right. So let's delete this sessions here. Let's delete this registration. Now, assuming that we didn't want to reference that existing file. I'm going to show some other options. So going back to the agenda that we have, we've seen how to reference standalone Python files in Snowpark for Python. Now we're going to go in and also show how to do some more registrations inline as opposed to using the session.register. Let's go back to our code. We're going to see a couple of more options. Let's define a new function within our Snowpark code. Let's call this D2 mask. We can make this function very simple. So let's take a user text and make that a string. This is just basic Python code, nothing to write home about. And let's return a string out of that. Define a simple variable here. Make this mask value. What is the mask value going to be? It's going to be my mask. Well, what is my mask? We're going to see what my mask is. Let's take the text from above. We're going to mask it, and then we're going to return that result back to the screen. All right, we're going to return my mask. Now, we somehow need to reference this code, and then we're going to take this function and register this as a UDF2. All right, and the reason why we're doing this is, think about, you want to reference an existing code. You might want to get access to that logic, do some more work, do some more value add to it, and then create your own UDF. That's essentially what we're trying to prove here. There's a couple of things that we're going to need to do to make this work. There are two ways to do this. One is do it inline, and I will show the second way that we can do this. So here we can come in and say add. You're going to put in the decorator. There are a couple of decorators you can put. You can do a UDF, you can do SP, start proc, and you can do a UDTF. There are a lot of things that you can do, but for now, let's just focus on UDF. Normally, we're going to come in to register that. We need a name, and this name is going to be what the UDF on the Snowflake side would be. Well, what name did we use? We used my mask F1. Let's stay with the same naming conversion. So I want this to be registered as, let's call this my mask F2. What else do we need? We need, is this permanent? Again, the things that we all need to make something registered. We want a stage location. Well, what stage location do we want to use? We're going to use the add through STG stage. And then last but not least, we're going to say, do we want to replace this every time we run it? I always keep this true. Depending on your requirements, you might not want to replace your function every time. But now keep that true. So all fine and good. If I were to run this, this would be a slam dunk function that works. This will register as a UDF. But there is a problem. Why? Because we're trying to reference a function that doesn't exist. Where is the implementation of this function? The implementation of this function is in this file, right? Previously, we saw how to access something from another file within your Snowpark for Python session. We want to get access to this. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to tell this in this decorator where this function has been implemented. You're going to do that by adding import. So remember in the previous example, we did the session.import. Here we're going to do import. And what are we going to import? We're going to import something, right? So we're going to import a file. Well, what file do we want? Right here, we get to specify the name of the file, dhmask.py. All right, now we're going in. We have UDF here. And of course, if we do that, we're going to have to end that with a comma there. Good. But we still are missing something. We're still not resolving the way we should. Now, this is where you can do either ways, right? We can do it either ways. You can come in here. My favorite way of doing it is to come in here and do an import, because you can import specific packages and modules inside of the function you're defining, instead of the UDF you're going to define. So what do we want to import, right? Again, let's go back to this example. We have something here in this file called dhmask. We want that, okay? So we can either directly import all the files, or you can even go in and import specific functions within it. For this example, I'm just going to go ahead and import everything. So I'm going to do dhmask and have that imported. Now, once we have dh_mask, which is this file we're referencing from within this, so we're going to have that, and this should resolve it. The UI doesn't show that, but it should resolve, right? So now we can access this method or this function inside of this particular code that we have, and that should be used for our UDF. And we'll specify this import here, and we just basically bring in that here. Go ahead and run this. Takes a few seconds. So that ran successfully. Go back over onto the Snowflake side. We have two functions. Do a refresh of this. We now have the second function that has been implemented. Again, this function, the logic for this is not in our Snowpark for Python code. We're referencing this from another file, right? If we can reference files, you can reference all kinds of packages that are out there. And we'll make some videos on that in future sessions. Copy this as an example. Go down and test the new function that we've just implemented. Go ahead and run this. It ran and it did not seem to like that. And this is good because this is a good debugging opportunity. I love the amount of information we have so we can really go in and debug. So here it's telling us that no module named regex is missing. For some reason, we deleted that when we were cleaning up our screen. So where did we have that? Here, what we're going to do, we can do this in two ways. We can do session dot add packages. So add packages. We did this already before. What package do we want? We want the regex package. All right. So that should be good. Let's go in. We've added that to the session. So let's go in and try this one more time by rerunning this code. Because a function is getting replaced, it should replace whatever we had there before. That was successful. So let's go back in. The same function, just do a refresh. Nothing really should have changed there. And if I to validate this, again, we're still complaining. And this is a good, I love these teaching moments here. So let's actually, I deleted that. I should have left that on the screen. Add import, because we're not importing the actual file. So it doesn't know where to look. We've just referenced the name of the file here in the import, but it needs to have access to it within the session. So let's do dh-mass.py and everything should be all good now. So let's run this one more time and this should be all successful. And voila, there we go. This is successful, and this is referencing my mask F2, which is what we've implemented here. So we're going in with the DH mask. We're referencing that my mask function from a separate file, and this is good. So we've registered this inline. So just to kind of recap where we are, the presentation, we've seen how to register that inline. We're going to show one more way on how to register this if you don't want to do the inline registration. And this is actually a very fun way. If you ask me, this is my preferred way of doing it. So let's go ahead and delete that. Now, assume that we just have a function like this that exists. This is just your plain vanilla Python function. Again, showing how to take Python and register that in Snowflake as functions. We're going to show stored procedures differently, but for now, let's just really focus on doing all this work with functions. So previously, we saw how to register from file. So just to refresh the code that we did last time, the previous code, we saw something like this, right? Where you can do session register from file and then point to your file. It should be all good. So let's delete that. Now we have this function here. How can we still register that? Not point to a file, but point to a specific method, all right? And not do it inline. So let's come in here. Again, session is a very powerful thing to have. .udf, of course, .register. So instead of register from file, where we get to specify the file and the function within that file, we're just going to say register, all right? What are we trying to register here? Well, we want to register this Python function, all right? So you can register inline, or you can take any Python function that you have and register that as a UDF this way. I like this way because then you kind of keep code separately. To me, it's more modular and easy to just read, but that's just a personal preference. For me, yours might be different. So what are the things that are needed when you're trying to register something? Again, we need a name. Well, what are we trying to register as a name? So just bear with me here. We want to register D2 mask. That's the function that we want to register as a UDF. So that is what we want. And of course, everything else, we want to make that is permanent. Let's make that true. Everything else is below here would be a standard name. Well, what is the name? When we register this on the Snowflake side, on the Snowpark side, what name do we want to show up here? All right, so this is number 3 option that we've seen. We've seen quite a bit of options today. So I'm gonna make this my mask F3. All right, so pretty, or you can do single quotes here. I usually recommend it that way. What else do we want? All right, we want to replace that, and of course we want to replace that, make that a true. What else could we do here? Let's do a stage location. We always need a stage location, don't we? Let's make that I think, what did we call that? We called it fruit stage. And so just like that, again, we have an existing code referencing something else. What we've done is now we're registering this. We're not registering from file like we did before. We're just simply saying, hey, take that function from above and register that as a UDF, give it a name on the Snowflake side. This name is what shows up on Snowflake side. This is not the name of this function. Don't let that be confusing to you. Right, so run this. Takes a few seconds here. All right, that was successful. Now, if we go back over to the Snowflake side and we do a refresh, So, yep, we did call that 2. Well, we should call it 3 though, shouldn't we? I think I had 2 already, so let's call it 3. Which is why that was confusing. It's overwritten the other function anyways, but that's not the problem. So 3, refresh that. We now have a function that called 3. Copy this and bring that over here, calling now my mask 3 with any log. We should be successful, and this is very awesome. So just to kind of recap what we've done quite a bit of things here. We've seen how to work with Snowpark with Python in Snowpark by just bringing that into the worksheets. For most people, this is the lowest friction way of getting started. Open up a worksheet and you can start writing your code away, right? There's really nothing stopping you from doing this. If SQL isn't capable of doing something, bring in the Python code, implement that, and open that up for everyone else to use within the organization. Then we've seen how to reference standalone code. If you have code that existed already in files and scripts, I have tons of this sitting around. I want to bring that over into the data warehouse so everyone can use it. You can do it. And we've seen how to reference files. We've seen several ways. You can import the file. You can register from file, create UDFs and do inline registration. You can create the functions, reference the files that you want, and then register them separately. We've seen a lot of ways, right? The documentation is very powerful, but hopefully this has given you all the ways to do that. Now, once you've registered all of that, that code lives within your environment. And just to show you how powerful this is, let's go into the sample data. Say we have the TPCDH tables. We have a table here. I'm going to just go ahead and do a place this in the editor. Do a select, limit that to 10 to see what is in this table. All right, we have some information, phone numbers, market segment, comments. Maybe for whatever reason, the organization doesn't think it makes sense for phone numbers to be visible to everyone else within the organization. That could be a problem. That could be a sensitive issue for PII type of scenarios. Let's see how we can take advantage of our masking function we've created in Python and use it like the way you will use any other SQL function. Let's go back, and the function that we had was in a different schema. That function is in the schema Demohub.dev, but we're looking at this. So what I'm going to do, let's use a 3. I'm just going to go ahead and place that in the editor. This is all we want. Grab this, take C phone, mask C phone. All right. So we can see actual values versus the mask values. Go ahead and run this. Boom. Just like that, we now have sensitive data. But if we had this all mask, let's do as mask here. I always like to be specific with that. So if we do this as mask, now a user might be querying the data and they see phone number, the structure, the format of it has been preserved. And this is important. We're not just replacing things with XXX here or deleting values, right? You still want analytics done and users to test and validate with data that looks like data, but this is not real, right? Because we've totally masked this, and this function now can be used by anyone within your organization for small data sets, for large data sets. Let's actually go in. I love to do this. Let's go in and get it from SF1000. All right, because we know the TPCDH data set has sample size. This is I think close to 1 billion or so records, right? Quite a bit of value there. I'll remove that. We are using the full power of Snowflake now, going against close to 1 billion records. This might take a while. I shouldn't have done this, but just in a few seconds here, Snowflake is gonna crush through this. If you didn't want to do this, let's say I'm gonna abort that for now. If you didn't want to do this, just come in. I'm working with an extra small. This is tiny, right? I can come in and say, let's just resize this. Boom, throw in like I'll just do this for the sake of the demo here, and I'm gonna shut down that bag. I'm just gonna resize this. I call this bringing the dump truck to do work. We've gone from an extra small. The cluster now is massive. This is not just 4 times. It's actually more than that, right? So it takes a few seconds here. Now we are rerunning that query using the 4Excel. Everyone in the organization, if you know SQL, are you familiar with the SQL syntax, you can use this logic. And you don't have to bother that this was written in Python. Or you don't have to bother that this could be complex. Maybe you have no idea how to do regex manipulation, but you can certainly use this in your Power BI reports, in your analytics. This is really, again, bringing data science, machine learning, feature engineering, whatever it is you're doing, to the masses and bringing everybody together, working on the same playing field, making data being a team sport. All right, so that was successful, and I'm going to go back and resize back to my extra small just to keep things very economical. I just love the ability to be very elastic, go up and come down as much as you need, and Snowflake gives you that flexibility on top of your Python code. So extremely powerful. Let's just run this one more time again with the extra small. I've gone back to the SF1. I think it's about 1 million records for this customers, and my data still keeps being masked, leveraging the function that we've just built. Very, very powerful. Now, hopefully this was helpful with this masterclass. I know it's a little bit of a longer session, but just really wanted to go through a step aside of the presentations and step by step unpack this for you. We've seen quite a bit. As always, I'll recommend check out the documentation. Documentation is always a good starting point. There are a lot of things that we might not have touched on, but I'll always say just go in, open up the documentation, read, and see what it says. It's a developer guide that also gives you good examples, as well as API. Some of the functions that I was using, add import, add packages. If this doesn't mean anything to you, for example, I didn't reference this just yet. We're going to call this out in future demos. You can reference a lot of functions. You can bring in custom packages, NumPy, Pandas, Keras, TensorFlow. There are so many things that we really haven't touched on for the advanced analytics side. So make sure that you have this documentation handy. Now, in future sessions, we're going to go in and do part 2, part 3, part 4, how many parts we do of this, more advanced concepts. So how do we take, it's one thing to take a function like this you've written and implement that and reference that and use that in Snowpark. We could have implemented the function here, but I just wanted to show how you reference from outside. But there are other things that we can do to get performance and to make this go faster, quicker, better, more efficiently. And that's the concept of the vectorized UDF. So how do we not just create a function and use it as a UDF, but how do we vectorize that so you can take certain optimizations and make that function run even faster when you score that against your data set? If you have a machine learning model and you're trying to do inference, because a function is naturally row by row, and that's how it executes, how do you vectorize that so you can execute that function in batches? I'm going to show how we take this, implement this as a vectorized function, leverage that, and you're going to see how that becomes very powerful in Snowflake. We're also going to see how to do user-defined table functions. So not just user-defined functions, but how do we do user-defined table functions? And there's just a lot more of things that we're going to go in and unpack and show to really get you familiar and leveraging and taking advantage of the capabilities that Snowpark for Python provides. So thank you so much for sticking with me to the end of this masterclass. It's very exciting having you here. Again, links to all of this will be in the description below. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to reach out directly. I'm going to try to put this on the GitHub. Just reach out. Like I've said the third time, look at the documentation. The goal for these demos is to be an extension to the documentation. So in anything that we miss, just go back to the documentation. Those will be more up to date than the demos that we do. So I always reference that. As always, if you have any questions or any comments, just again, let me know and we'll see what we can do. All of these demos will be available on the Demo Hub. We've rebranded the site and we're updating demos for the different tools. So of course, check those out and share that with somebody that might get value out of it. Now, as always, you have been very awesome sticking to the end. I have been through. I'll see you in our next demo.